Good morning. Do you able to listen me? Are you hearing me? Yes or no? Okay. Shall we start? Am I audible properly? Okay. So today we are starting here with the second unit, that is the membrane transport. Okay. We have finished our first unit, that is the enzyme, structure of enzyme, and then active site of enzyme, general properties of enzyme. Enzyme combines with the substrate and converts substrate into product. There are two theories proposed for the mechanism of enzyme action. That two theories are lock and key model and induced fit theory. Okay. Then what we have seen, the various factors which are affecting enzyme activity, which includes the effect of substrate concentration, effect of pH, temperature, activators and inhibitors on enzyme activity. Then what we have studied, about the Michaelis-Menten equation, that is the derivation of Michaelis-Menten equation, that is relationship between the initial velocity V0, then Vmax, that is the maximum velocity, then substrate concentration, which all are related by the term Km, that is the Michaelis-Menten constant. We have seen the application of enzymes in various fields, that is in industrial application, in therapeutic purpose, and in analytical purpose. Then what we have studied, various concepts involving in enzyme action, that is the catalysis, energy of activation, transition state theory. Energy of activation is the energy required to convert substrate into product. In presence of enzyme, the energy required is very low, while in absence of enzyme, energy required is high. So energy of activation, then what we have studied, transition state, that is the transition state is achieved in between the enzyme and substrate, which is unstable, and substrate readily undergoes, or transition state readily undergoes the stable state, that is conversion of substrate into product takes place. So we have all seen all this in the topic of enzymology. If you have any difficulty about all these terms, you please go through it all. You please see all the lectures which are present on YouTube again and again. And if you have difficulty, then you please write in the chat box, or please send your WhatsApp message. Now, from today, we are studying about the unit second, that is the membrane transport. So, unit second, membrane transport. It includes first the structure of cell membrane. In this unit, what we are going to study, the nutritional categories of microorganism, structure and function of bacterial cell membrane, definition of cell membrane, structure of cell membrane, various models for the cell membrane, and functions of cell membrane. Because the cell membrane is related to the transport, transport of various nutrients from outside environment into the inside. This process takes place with the help of cell wall, cell membrane. There are number of carriers which are present in the cell membrane. Proteins or enzymes are embedded in the cell membrane. We are now going to study about the structure of cell membrane. So first is the nutritional categories of microorganisms. Nutritional classification of bacteria. This is based on the source of carbon, energy and electron. How organisms are classified? Organisms are classified on the basis of carbon, energy and electron source. So on the basis of carbon source, organisms are classified into two main types, autotrophs and heterotrophs. Autotrophs are the organism which uses CO2, that is the atmospheric CO2 acts as a sole or principal source of carbon. Autotrophs are those organisms which utilizes CO2 as the principal source of carbon, while heterotrophs are those organisms which utilizes the preformed organic molecule as the carbon source. Which organisms are included in heterotrophs? Those organisms which utilizes already formed organic molecule as the carbon source. Autotrophs, which organism includes as autotrophs all the photosynthetic organism, photosynthetic bacteria like green algae, some green bacteria, algae bacteria and green plants which utilizes CO2 as the principal source of carbon, and with the help of CO2 and water they are able to prepare their own food material. So all these bacteria are autotrophic organisms. The heterotrophs are those which utilizes already formed organic molecule, means autotroph prepared the food material and that food material is taken up by the heterotrophic organism. So heterotrophs include all animals, then human being and some bacteria, means number of all bacteria, heterotrophic in nature, only the organism bacteria which are included in the class autotrophs, these are the autotrophic bacteria. एकच असा क्लास आहे की जो ऑटोट्रॉपिक आहे, while other class or other bacteria, other types of all bacteria are heterotrophic bacteria, including bacteria, animal and human being. These are the heterotrophic organism. Then based on the energy source, organisms are again classified as phototrophs and chemotrophs. Okay, what are phototrophs? Phototrophs are the organism which utilizes sunlight as the energy source, while chemotrophs are the organism which utilizes organic and inorganic compound as the energy source. Phototrophs are again utilizes sunlight as the energy source, means they are autotrophic organism which are also phototropic organism. They utilizes sunlight as the energy source, and with the help of sunlight and CO2 and water they carry out the process of photosynthetic and prepare their own food material. So algae and most of the algae, beside algae, one part of bacteria, that is the autotrophs, that organisms are photo and autotrophic in nature, which utilizes the sunlight as the energy source. Beside phototrophs, we human being, animals and rest of all the microorganisms, these are the chemotrophic in nature. Chemotrophs means oxidation of organic or inorganic compound as the energy source. So chemotrophs are the organism which utilizes organic or inorganic compound as the energy source. म्हणजे हे ऑर्गॅनिक इनऑर्गॅनिक कंपाऊंड जे पण आपण फूड म्हणून घेतो त्यांचं ऑक्सिडेशन होतं बॉडीमध्ये. ऑक्सिडेशन होतं म्हणजे काय होतं की त्यांचं डिग्रेडेशन होतं, आणि डिग्रेडेशन झाल्यानंतर दॅट कंपाऊंड yields एनर्जी and that energy is used as the energy source for most of the reaction. Okay, so these are the chemotrophs. Then based on the electron source, organisms are classified as a lithotrophs that uses reduced inorganic substances as the electron source, and organotrophs that is use the organic compound as the electron source. So based on the electron source also, organisms are classified as a lithotrophs and organotrophs. Beside this classification, organisms are again classified as a photoautotrophs, photoheterotrophs, chemoautotrophs, chemoheterotrophs. Means there are some organisms which are autotrophic in nature and phototrophs also. But there are some organisms which are autotrophic in nature, but these are the chemotrophs. That is, they utilizes the energy from the organic compound. Then photoheterotrophs, that is, they utilizes the organic compound but utilizes the sunlight as the energy source. Chemoheterotrophs, that is, this organism use the organic molecule as the carbon source and organic molecule as the energy source. So combinedly based on the carbon and energy source also, organisms are classified. Okay. So this is the nutritional classification of organism. Do you have any difficulty in the nutritional classification of organism, or do you get it? Do you have any difficulty in the nutritional classification of organism? Organisms are classified on the basis of carbon source, that is the autotrophs, heterotrophs, on the basis of energy source, that is the phototrophs and chemotrophs, and based on the electron source as the lithotrophs and organotrophs. Okay. Do you have any difficulty? Do you have any difficulty in all this classification? Then next I will start with the structure and function of cell membrane. So what is the bacterial cell membrane? Bacterial cell membrane is the biological membrane that separates the interior of the cell from outside environment and protect the cell from its environment. Bacterial cell membrane is the biological membrane that protect the cell or that separate the cell from outside environment and protect the cell from its environment. Means it main function of bacterial cell membrane is the protection of cell. It protect the cell from the outside environment. Outside environment म्हणजे outside environment contain number of toxic compound, antibiotics or other salt concentration. So cell membrane protect the cell from outside environment and it separate the cell फ्रॉम इनसाइड टू द आउटसाइड. म्हणजे ते सेलला सेपरेट करतं, नाही तर अदरवाईज सेल सगळा एकच दिसेल आणि त्याचा सेलचं स्ट्रक्चर दिसणार नाही आपल्याला. सो इट सेपरेट द इंटेरियर ऑफ द सेल फ्रॉम द आउटसाइड एन्व्हायरमेंट अँड प्रोटेक्ट द सेल फ्रॉम इट्स एन्व्हायरमेंट. So cell membrane, it is also known as the plasma membrane or cytoplasmic membrane or plasma lemma. What is the other name of the cell membrane is the plasma membrane or cytoplasmic membrane or plasma lemma. Cell membrane is nearly about 5 to 8 nanometer in thick. It selectively controls the movement of molecule inside and outside the cell. What is the function of cell membrane? Cell membrane selectively controls the movement of molecule inside and outside of the cell. Cell membrane consists mainly phospholipid bilayer containing embedded peripheral proteins. What is the content of cell membrane or what is the composition of cell membrane? Cell membrane consists of the phospholipid bilayer. कशाचं बनलेलं असतं ते? फॉस्फोलिपिडचं. कंटेनिंग एम्बेडेड अँड पेरिफेरल प्रोटीन्स, म्हणजे त्याच्यामध्ये पण प्रोटीन असतात आणि त्याच्या आजूबाजूला पण प्रोटीन असतात. पेरिफेरल प्रोटीन एज वेल एज इन फॉस्फोलिपिड बायलेयर देर इज अ प्रेझेन्स ऑफ प्रोटीन्स. सो इट इज द मेम्ब्रेन, phospholipid bilayer membrane with the proteins present in it. It selectively controls the movement of molecule inside and outside of the cell. Cell membrane is nearly about 5 to 8 nanometer in thickness. This membrane, it is also known as the plasma membrane or cytoplasmic membrane or plasma lemma. Cell membrane is the biological membrane that separates the interior of the cell from outside environment and protect the cell from its environment. Okay, so which are the different models of the cell membrane? Actually, there are 2 to 3 different models were proposed for the cell membrane. First is the Davson Daniel model. Actually, you have studied about the cell membrane in SYBSc. If you have the notes of SYBSc or some textbook of SYBSc, you see about the cell membrane in the SYBSc notes. So first model proposed for the cell membrane is the Davson Daniel model of the plasma membrane. It was proposed in 1935. This model described the phospholipid bilayer lies between the 2 layers of globular protein. This model described the phospholipid bilayer, that is membrane made up of phospholipid bilayer बिटवीन द 2 layers ऑफ ग्लोब्युलर प्रोटीन. म्हणजे बाहेरच्या बाजूला ग्लोब्युलर प्रोटीन आहे आणि त्याच्यामध्ये फॉस्फोलिपिड आहे. सो इट डिस्क्राइब द प्रेझेन्स ऑफ फॉस्फोलिपिड बायलेअर लाईज बिटवीन द 2 layers ऑफ ग्लोब्युलर प्रोटीन. Most accepted model for the structure of cell membrane is the fluid mosaic model. So this is the second model for the cell membrane. Because there are the limitations and some drawbacks of the Daniel-Davson model, that model was not accepted universally. And the next model is the fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane, which was proposed in 1972 by Singer and Nicolson, who proposed the model of fluid mosaic model, that is the in 1972 by S.J. Singer and G.L. Nicolson. Okay, that is the fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane. So according to this model, in a continuous bilayer of phospholipid molecules, globular proteins are embedded. म्हणजे हे मॉडेल काय डिस्क्राइब करतं की फॉस्फोलिपिड बायलेअर मध्ये ग्लोब्युलर प्रोटीन आहे. ओके, आणि हे मॉडेल काय डिस्क्राइब करतं, कंटिन्युअस बायलेअर ऑफ फॉस्फोलिपिड मॉलिक्यूल अँड ग्लोब्युलर प्रोटीन्स आर एम्बेडेड इन बिटवीन देम. म्हणजे फॉस्फोलिपिड मध्ये प्रोटीन्स आहे आणि हे मॉडेल काय डिस्क्राइब करतो, फॉस्फोलिपिड बायलेअर आहे आणि त्याच्या आजूबाजूला प्रोटीन्स आहे असं. म्हणजे ग्लोब्युलर प्रोटीन मध्ये फॉस्फोलिपिड आहे असं यांचं म्हणणं आहे. कोणाचं, डॅव्सन डॅनियल मॉडेल. वाईल फ्लुइड मोझाइक मॉडेल प्रपोजेस दॅट द कंटिन्युअस बायलेअर ऑफ फॉस्फोलिपिड मॉलिक्यूल अँड प्रोटीन्स आर एम्बेडेड इन बिटवीन दॅट लेअर. मीन्स प्रोटीन्स आर नॉट प्रेझेंट between the phospholipid, but these are embedded in between the bilayer of the phospholipid. So this is the difference between the two model, Davson Daniel model and fluid mosaic model, which is most widely accepted model of the cell membrane, proposed in 1972 by S.J. Singer and G.L. Nicolson. So what are the components of the plasma membrane? Membrane lipids are the amphipathic molecule. It consists of the lipid as well as globular protein. Phospholipid bilayer means it consists of the lipid and beside that lipid it consists of the protein molecule. So membrane lipids are, do you get up to this? Membrane lipids are the amphipathic molecule. Amphipathic molecule means these are amphi means double. Amphipathic molecule means they consist of polar hydrophilic head and made up of, that head is made up of glycerol and phosphate group and consist of 2 non-polar hydrophobic tail made up of fatty acids. Membrane lipids are the amphipathic molecule consist of polar hydrophilic head. Head is made up of hydrophilic molecule, that is glycerol and phosphate group. Okay, and it again consists of non-polar hydrophobic tail. हेडला टेल जॉईन झालेली असते कशाची, that tail is made up of fatty acids, that is the phospholipids heads. That heads are facing outwards and fatty acid tails are facing inward. So protein may be either integral or peripheral proteins and serve in many different functions. प्रोटीनचे वेगवेगळे फंक्शन असतात. न्यूट्रन ट्रान्सपोर्ट हे जे फंक्शन आहे, that function is the major function of the presence of protein in the phospholipid bilayer of the membrane. Okay, what is the structure of or component of the plasma membrane. Do you get what I am teaching here? Do you get it? Yes or no? Okay. So, what is the component of the plasma membrane? Plasma membrane consists of the membrane lipids as well as the proteins. So membrane lipids are the amphipathic molecule. Amphipathic means they are made up of hydrophilic as well as the hydrophobic molecule. They consist of the polar hydrophilic head. Head is the polar hydrophilic in nature, made up of glycerol and phosphate group, and they consist of non-polar hydrophobic tail. That tail is made up of fatty acid phospholipid, made up of fatty acids, and this phospholipid head, that head, the head is facing outward the membrane, while fatty acid tail is facing inward of the membrane. म्हणजे हे जे आहे फॉस्फोलिपिड हेड जे आहे ते फॉस्फोलिपिड हेड मध्ये असतं, सॉरी बाहेर असतं. फॉस्फोलिपिड हेड इज फेसिंग आउटवर्ड अँड फॅटी ऍसिड टेल इज फेसिंग इनवर्ड ऑफ द membrane. And the lipid it consists of membrane consists of the proteins. That proteins, these may be the integral or peripheral proteins, and which functions in many different functions. So there are two types of the membrane proteins: integral proteins or intrinsic proteins. These are tightly bound to the lipid bilayer, cannot be easily separated, and insoluble in nature. There are two types of the membrane proteins: integral proteins or intrinsic proteins, peripheral proteins or extrinsic proteins. Intrinsic proteins and extrinsic proteins. Intrinsic proteins are also called as the integral proteins, and extrinsic proteins are also called as the peripheral proteins. So integral proteins, these are the tightly bound to the lipid bilayer. They cannot be easily separated and insoluble in nature. These proteins cannot be easily separated from the phospholipid layer or lipid bilayer, and they are insoluble in nature. While peripheral proteins or extrinsic proteins, these are loosely connected to the membrane, they are easily separated, and they are soluble in nature. Okay, so these are the two types of the membrane protein. First is the integral protein, which is also called as the intrinsic proteins. These proteins are the tightly bound to the lipid bilayer. They cannot be easily separated, and they are insoluble in nature. Second one is the peripheral proteins. These are also called as the extrinsic proteins, which are loosely connected to the membrane, not easily separated, and soluble in nature. The lipid and protein subunit of the membrane gives an appearance of mosaic, and the membrane freely changes. Hence, the structure of the membrane is considered as the fluid mosaic model. Why it is called as the fluid mosaic? Because of the lipid protein subunit of the membrane gives an appearance of mosaic. Mosaic tiles सारखा appearance असतं त्याला. It gives the appearance of the mosaic because of the presence of lipid protein subunit of the membrane, and that membrane freely changes because of that presence of protein and lipid, and hence the structure of the membrane is considered as the fluid mosaic. Do you get the structure of membrane? Do you get the structure of lipid and protein present in the membrane? Do you get the structure of proteins and lipids present in the membrane? If you want to see again, you can refer your SYBSc notes also. But for SYBSc level, we don't have too much in depth. Only superficially we have to write about the structure and functions of cell membrane. Why we have to study the cell membrane again? Because it is related to the transport of nutrients. Nutrient transport is associated with the structure of cell membrane. Okay, so cell membrane is made up of protein, phospholipid bilayer, and proteins. Okay, if you want, you can again see in your SYBSc notes, or this is available on YouTube also. Integral proteins or extrinsic protein, peripheral protein or extrinsic proteins, which are the loosely connected to the membrane. Intrinsic proteins are tightly bound to the membrane. They cannot easily separated, and this can be easily separated. आपल्याला एवढं डिफरन्स बिटवीन द इंटिग्रल आणि पेरिफेरल प्रोटीन्स लिहायचा नाहीये, फक्त स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ सेल मेम्ब्रेन. ओके, and because this membrane protein and lipid, they freely changes the in the membrane, the structure is known as the fluid mosaic body. So you see this diagram. So what is the structure of membrane? These are the phospholipid. These are the head. See, this is the phosphate head. This is fatty acid tail, polar or hydrophilic head, and this fatty acid non-polar hydrophobic tail. So this hydrophobic tail is lying inside of the membrane, while this polar head group or phosphate head group, it lies outward of the membrane. हे बाहेरच्या डायरेक्शनला असतं, हे मधल्या डायरेक्शनला असतं. And these are the proteins present in this phospholipid layer. या phospholipid layer मध्ये हे proteins असे embedded असतात. These are the channel protein. These are the carrier proteins. Some are the glycoproteins. So molecules passes easily from outside environment to the inside. Okay, so this is the structure of membrane, lipid and protein. These are the peripheral proteins present outside of the membrane. Outside म्हणजे त्याच्यातच असतात ते, पण त्यांचं फेसिंग जे असतं ते बाहेरून असतं. चॅनल प्रोटीन्स आर एम्बेडेड थ्रू आउट द मेम्ब्रेन. हे पूर्ण मेम्ब्रेन मध्ये एम्बेडेड असतात. These are known as the integral proteins. These are the peripheral proteins. Peripheral proteins means they lies slightly outwards of the membrane, outward direction ला असतात, that peripheral proteins. Integral proteins, these are present throughout the membrane. These are called as the integral proteins. Okay, this is the lipid structure present in the membrane. Lipid structure are made up of phosphate head group. हा जो आहे हा phosphate head group आहे, which lies outside of the membrane, and they consist of the fatty acid tail. This fatty acid tail of both head group lies inside of the membrane. अशी ती मध्ये असते, याचं असं कंटिन्युअस लेअर असतं सेलला, आणि ह्या कंटिन्युअस लेअर मध्ये सेलचं मधलं एनक्लोजर असतं. म्हणजे त्याच्यामध्ये काय असतं की तुमचं सेल सायटोप्लाझम मध्ये रायबोझोम्स, डीएनए, आरएनए, cytoplasmic granules, all this content is present inside this membrane. So this is the structure of cell membrane. Do you able to see clearly? Then what are the functions of the plasma membrane? Plasma membrane separate the components of the cell from its outside environment. म्हणजे outside आणि inside दोघं सेपरेट करतो कोण? Plasma membrane. Plasma membrane allows the passage of only selected substances into the cell. It allows the passage of only selected substances. त्याचं स्ट्रक्चर जे आहे हे असं दिसतं, जे स्ट्रक्चर, दिस इज द कॉम्पॅक्ट इन नेचर. हे फॉस्फोलिपिड हेड आणि टेल जे आहे ते एकमेकांना एकदम जॉईन झालेले असतात. हे असे जरी याच्यामध्ये थोडं तरी डिस्टन्स डायग्राम मध्ये जरी दिसत असलं तरी ते ऍक्च्युअली मेम्ब्रेन मध्ये दीज आर द कॉम्पॅक्टली अरेंज टू इच अदर. compactly present, lies very close to each other, and there is no gap between these two polar head group or presence of protein in this phospholipid layer. या लेअर मध्ये प्रोटीन पण टाइटली कॉम्पॅक्टली त्याच्यामध्ये ते प्रेझेंट असतात किंवा त्यांची तशी अरेंजमेंट असते. सो इट डज नॉट अलाउ द पासेज ऑफ एनी एक्सटर्नल न्यूट्रिएंट फ्रॉम आउटसाइड एन्व्हायरमेंट टू द इनसाइड. जेव्हा हे मेम्ब्रेन प्रोटीन त्याला आतमध्ये पास करतील तेव्हाच ते मध्ये जाईल. अदरवाइज इट विल नॉट अलाउ द पासेज ऑफ एनी न्यूट्रिएंट फ्रॉम आउटसाइड एन्व्हायरमेंट टू द इनसाइड. So it allows the passage of only selected substances into the cell. Next is it supports the cell and helps in maintaining the shape of the cell. Plasma membrane support the cell. बरोबर आहे, it naturally support the cell. जर सेल वॉल सेल मेम्ब्रेन नाही राहणार, जर तिथे नसेल तर काय होईल की सेलचं कंटेंट सगळं बाहेर येऊन जाईल. सो इट सपोर्ट द सेल अँड इट मेंटेन द शेप ऑफ द सेल. त्याच्यामुळे सेलला एक पर्टिक्युलर सर्क्युलर किंवा मग रॉड शेप किंवा स्पायरल शेप किंवा मग जो पण शेप असेल, हेक्सागोनल शेप, वॉट एव्हर द शेप प्रेझेंट टू द cell is due to the presence of this cell wall cell membrane proteins and lipid present in the cell wall cell membrane. So this, it gives the shape to the cell. Then lipid bilayer act as a selectively permeability barrier. Selectively permeability barrier, it protect the integrity of the interior of the cell. बघा आता मी जे फंक्शन तेव्हा सांगितलं ते आता येते. That lipid bilayer, it acts as a selectively permeability barrier. Selectively permeability barrier means what? It allows only the passage of only selective substance inside the cell. Permeability barrier म्हणजे काही पण आलं आणि मध्ये सेलच्या मध्ये गेलं असं होत नाही. It protects the integrity of the interior of the cell. Otherwise interior सेलचं जे मधलं एन्व्हायरमेंट आहे ते कोलॅप्स होऊन जाईल आणि सेल कंटेंट सगळं जे आहे ते बाहेर येईल. So it protects the integrity of the interior of the cell. Then many enzyme systems are involved in the biosynthetic activities. These are attached to the plasma membrane. आता bacterial cell मध्ये mitochondria नसते, तुम्हाला माहिती आहे. Mitochondria is present in eukaryotic cell. In mitochondria, most of the enzymes are present, but where the mitochondria is absent in that cells, most of the biosynthetic activities they takes place in the plasma membrane. म्हणजे प्लाझ्मा मेम्ब्रेनचं डेरिव्हेटिव्ह असतं पुढे काही थोडंसं एक्सटेन्शन, ज्याच्यामध्ये these enzyme systems are located and that enzyme system it carries out the biosynthetic activities of the cell. So many of the enzymes are located in the plasma membrane of the cell. Then proteins of the plasma membrane are concerned with the enzyme activities, transport of molecule, receptors of the hormones, recognition centers and antigens and channel or pumps. What is the function of the membrane protein? They are concerned with the enzymatic activities. They transport various molecules from outside to inside and inside to outside of the cell. इनसाइड टू आउटसाइड जे पण टॉक्सिक मॉलिक्युल तयार होणारे बायोसिंथेटिक ऍक्टिव्हिटीज मध्ये ते आउटसाइड पास करतो. Then it acts as a receptor for various hormones. It acts as the recognition centers and presence of antigen on the cell wall cell membrane. It detects the external particles. किंवा मग तो बॅक्टेरिया अटॅच होतो ह्युमन सेलला किंवा बॅक्टेरियल सेलला with the help of presence of that antigen to the cell, and it as a channel or pumps to the cell. That protein acts as a channels or pumps to the cell. So these are the proteins, function of the proteins and lipids present in the cell. Okay, thank you for your constant watching. Now in short I am again, do you have any difficulty? In short I am shall I explain in short again all, or do you have clear all this lecture? This lecture will remain on the YouTube. If you have any difficulty, you mention in the chat box, you send your WhatsApp message or you write in the chat box. Very simple, the structure of cell membrane. From next lecture we will actually see what is our next topic, that is the transport of nutrients. I will add the notes of this first topic very soon. Don't worry, till that you go through this online lectures which are present on the YouTube. Watch it again and again when you will find a free time. If you have any difficulty, you write in the, you send it on the WhatsApp group. Okay. So now I am going to stop the screen sharing because there are no any kind of difficulty. And you may have the next lecture, and because this YouTube live session, it will have limitations, means it have now very few timings are remaining, and for the next lecture I'm now going to stop my screen sharing. If you have any difficulty, you send the WhatsApp.